We did it, guys. Gregory's here.
And John.
And we just literally are coming back from viewing Suicide Squad. Getting a lot of controversy already just because of the fact that it has a low score on Rotten Tomatoes.
Everybody hates DC.
Everybody hates DC, especially Rotten Tomatoes. They hate it. We will be doing a spoiler review this weekend. We just want to get a quick review up right now. I liked it. I thought it was fun. Here's what I'll say. This is the first thing I told John. We were walking out. We were going down the escalator. I said that everyone's right. Every rating on Rotten Tomatoes is right.
Single, any opinion you come across.
Any opinion is right.
Is the right.
Yeah, and everyone who gave it a rotting capsule, totally agree with them. Everyone who gave it fresh, I was like, yeah, I agree with them too.
I couldn't talk you out of having fun, and I also couldn't talk you out of having some major problems with this.
Yes, the stars. The film is very choppy. It's messy. It's chaotic. It's all over the place between present moment and flat. It's uneven.
Well, and most of the scenes seem truncated. Like, the pacing is like really like, let's move this along.
It does have all that. However, I thought it was I had a blast watching it. I thought like the music choices were fun. Not some of them don't always work, but I felt like
sometimes.
I felt like for the most part, I thought it was really, really fun. Will Smith as Deadshot was one of my big concerns actually, because I was like, this might be like a distracting celebrity to put in here amongst the rest of the cast without like him having to try anything to steal the show. He kind of does. He leads the show. Like he is the lead of this movie, and I think he does a really, really good job. He brings that celebrity Will Smith charisma, charm to the role of Deadshot, this like ruthless hitman. He still nails it. He's so badass. He's funny. Margot Robbie, she's getting a lot of credit too as Harley Quinn. I've seen every episode of Batman the Animated Series. I've seen a lot of her other appearances in like other DC works. And I think that Margot Robbie totally embodied this role of Harley Quinn. When I was watching this film, I felt like I was watching like a fan make this movie. I felt like it was a fan fiction kind of movie. You know, because they do these flashbacks and Batman shows up, and as a guy who's a huge fan of Batman, see, I didn't feel this with BVS. I don't like BVS. But with this one, I was like, this is more for people like me, who just love to see like all these characters come together. There's choppy stuff, and then there's tributes, and there's homages, and there's little treats for the fans. So even though the film is a mess, even though the pacing's off and everything, I still thought that it was really, really entertaining. The messiness kind of worked for me, and sometimes it doesn't. Because sometimes the messiness is like, well, yeah, this is a story about a bunch of like dysfunctional criminals, so this film's gonna feel a little chaotic. I like the introduction of the whole Suicide Squad members. Not saying they fully took advantage of each member of the Suicide Squad throughout the film. I still like their introductions, though. You want to say something, John? Sorry, I just keep talking the whole time.
That's one of the better parts of this movie to me, just in general. It's like, I like the Suicide Squad. I think everybody they got to be a member of the Suicide Squad. Even the characters like Katana, who we don't ever get to know who she is except for like the one time she shows up and they're like, that's who she is.
Jay Hernandez as Diablo, I thought he did a really good job in the performance.
All the actors brought personality, and like when they do get to be together, like you can feel the magic off that. Like they are a cool team. And when that stuff gets to shine, like you're like, that's the stuff I wanted.
Actually, right before watching this film, I saw that the runtime was 2 hours and 3 minutes. Yeah. And I was like, Man of Steel and BVS were like 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
They probably were like, you guys need to cut down Suicide Squad. Because you do get that sense. The whole time when I was watching this movie, I felt like these scenes were probably significantly more fleshed out. Where the actors really got to play, because the actors do such a great job in these roles.
Yeah, man.
These actors are really on their A game.
Everyone's natural, and they have a lot of chemistry, and it's just, the editing gets in the way of that, the pacing.
It felt like that's where the biggest conflict happened, was with the editing. As I was watching this movie, I was kind of re-editing it in my head. I felt like the placement of scenes was kind of off at times. I felt like they shot a lot. I felt like they shot a lot of stuff. And then they were like, whoa, now we gotta jam this into 2 hours. We gotta like cut down on pretty much every scene we have.
Every scene does feel like it's pared down to like the most important 10 lines. And it's not as bad as it can be, in like BVS has scenes like that where you're like, what is this? Like every scene is still a scene. It's just some of them you can tell that they were pared down.
Yeah, I didn't feel like this was a lazy film.
No, not at all. This film's trying really
hard. I felt like this film really did try. I know people said the BVS extended cut's better. I really feel like there's a great film, like a genuinely great film in this movie of David Ayer's original cut, probably.
The film that I got really excited for is in here somewhere. Yeah, it's just buried under a lot of rejiggering.
It really just feels like it's the editing that's the main issue for me.
Yeah, totally. It feels like somebody remixed the story and drowned it in music. It's like, that's the thing where the music gets tiresome, is there are scenes where I'm like, this is really cool. And there are other scenes where I'm like, it sounds like somebody told you to put another cool song in. It does kind of drown itself in style, and it all starts to taste the same for me after a while, which is just a bummer, because you see it's all on the screen. All the ideas are there, all the set pieces are there, all the production design is there, like everything they need is there. It's just kind of cut to shit, you know.
Like I really feel like the final product, like the way the scenes were, laid out and structured, I don't feel like that was how the original script went. I just don't get that sense, because I'm like, everyone seems to be doing a really good job.
Yeah, it's like everyone's
it just
really
must be
trying.
the way this film was in the final cut, is what they call it, Like Captain Boomerang, Jai Courtney. The
Jai
one
Courtney.
role I like this guy in.
I was like, I'm really enjoying, like, please let him be Australian all the time, because he's really fun to watch.
That's another thing too. I laughed a lot in this movie. Occasionally it was unintentional, but most of the time it was intentional humor, and I found myself like laughing quite a lot at this film. It's not like a comedy. It didn't feel like out of place jokes ever, which I really admired too. Because I was worried that they were gonna try to like infuse humor with out of place humor. But I thought the humor that came from the characters was really well done.
Some of it did feel a little out of place for me, but that's, again, it felt like an editing thing. It felt like they just cut a scene short on a joke instead. Where most of the jokes come from, it seems like it's true to the characters, and they are funny. Like, everybody gets a moment to have personality and to get a moment to make us chuckle,
To wrap up the editing thing for me, like, it felt like David Ayer got to make the film he wanted to make. But when it came to the final edit, the final cut, that's when studios like stepped in and were like, okay, you need to trim this down by like a half hour.
Word from the Hollywood Reporter. Like, all movie news is up for negotiation because, like, studios just flat out lied to us now. Like, they can tell you anything they want. So I don't know what the truth is. Hollywood Reporter basically said after BVS, they listened to all the criticism and they got Trailer Park, who's the company that cut the trailers for Suicide Squad, when people went nuts over that trailer with all the Queen music, they got them to do a cut that was basically more along the lines of the complaints. More fun, more snappy, more action, stuff like that. And then they had the David Ayer cut, and then they tested both of them and kind of arrived at a cut in the middle of the two. They kind of melted them together, and it feels like that.
One thing that would bother me sometimes, especially with Viola Davis, who's great in the movie. She's fantastic. Yeah. Viola Davis and Will Smith. I felt like a little too often they were reminding us that they were bad guys. And I felt like, why don't you just show us like why they're bad instead of constantly just telling us they're bad guys.
This is where an R-rated superhero movie could have been really great.
I think it would have been totally okay. And David Ayer's previous films are all like a hard R.
What this guy does is gritty criminal movies, and you don't need to make it super bloody or super gory, but it wouldn't be so much more effective if you just showed us that these are bad people.
Yeah.
Instead of just kind of telling us and introducing us to them in a prison.
And Killer Croc, I thought, like, I know he's like a thuggish criminal, like, as I've seen the animated series.
Yeah.
But in this one, I felt like they just made him purely like a thug. Doesn't really have intellect.
He just kind of hangs out.
He doesn't. Yeah, he just grunts the whole movie, and it doesn't become necessary until like the very end of the film.
Until like Act 3, like he kind of just stands in every scene and goes at somebody, and that's about it.
And the stuff with Enchantress, people were complaining a lot about that. And I really feel like simple trick could have been editing.
I told John for her, because especially when she really gets to be Enchantress, it's like the audio syncs a little off and the effects are wacky, and she's kind of drowned in effects. So I don't know what that performance is really.
But I feel like the first half with Enchantress, the stuff was good.
Yeah.
Before this other character gets introduced that's related to Enchantress, that's when it like. Yeah, that's when I got like, whoa, what? With Enchantress, like, there were some really spooky effects, some really creepy moments with her. It's like, whoa, this is like out of a legit horror film.
Yeah. They're really, taking hold of the voodoo witch vibe, and that gives a new flavor, to a movie like this.
Honestly, a character I liked that I wasn't expecting to have any interest in was Joel Kinnaman's character, Rick Flag.
Yeah.
He's in this movie, like, more than
Most of the
other
time.
Suicide Squaders. Yeah, I thought he was actually really enjoyable to watch. I felt like he brought layers to the role that were, it made for a really enjoyable performance.
Well, that's one of those roles that could be easily like, oh, we have to deal with this military guy the whole time. Just let it be the Suicide Squad. And I actually didn't mind having him around. Like, he's a good foil, and he drove the story in a cool way. Like,
that's what I mean. Like, everything's there. I'm sure
it's all here.
I'm sure all the footage is there because, like, that scene that they were like teasing in the trailer with Joker and Dr. Harley Quinzel, Harleen Quinzel before she's ever becomes Harley Quinn. That scene's cut down in like 10 seconds. But I'm sure like they probably filmed that scene for quite a while. I'm sure there's a lot more dialogue there.
This is a movie that it just doesn't seem like this should be a walk in the park for David Ayer. This should be fun for him. And like, you know, some of the problems, it's like it seems like everything's here and it's just been jiggered by, you know, paranoia.
And I guess the biggest letdown in terms of marketing and hype, I wasn't let down. It's more of kind of like, I wish this was there.
I wish
was Joker. Because when I saw the trailers, I was worried that what the film did is what I was worried was going to happen, which is Joker's kind of like his own thing going on that we cut back to every once in a while. And it's very brief. Every scene Jared Leto has is super brief, but you can tell this guy did a lot of work on the Joker. Like, he has these like animalistic kind of like hunting his prey, sometimes moves like a snake or like a tiger, like hunting him down people. He's manipulative. Like, you could tell there's a lot of layers and a lot of depth that Jared Leto did create. Otherwise, like, makes sense why he did all the crazy method acting shit. But this movie does not give any time for us to really see all that like dedication and hard work he did.
I enjoyed those scenes, but it is true. The way it appears now, and again, they said like, I think he said they cut a lot of his scenes out. It seems like you could cut him out of this cut of the movie and it wouldn't really make that much of a difference.
Yeah, honestly, I would have liked for them to just hint at Joker and allude to the Joker. Maybe do some of those cool shots where like, oh, it's the back of the Joker. Rather than seeing the Joker in this film. I guess the disappointing part about the Joker in this is like, you could tell Jared Leto's doing an amazing job. But with the screen time they give him, it's just not enough. They quickly cut through his scenes, and when I'm watching it, it's like, I kind of don't care about you.
Like, I'm just like, oh yeah, you're in this movie.
I find everyone else in the whole Suicide Squad story way more interesting than whatever the hell you got going on right now.
Yeah, it's just kind of a distraction. I don't actually know how I feel about his performance, and I would have liked a few more scenes to tell. Because I can tell he did a lot of work. I don't know how I feel about his take, and I'm just kind of left there.
Yeah.
There are a couple scenes where I'm like, that's really cool, and there are a couple scenes where I was like, it's so short. I don't know.
At the end of the day, when I was watching this film, I was having a great time. I thought it was a lot of fun. Despite my criticisms, I would still totally recommend you go watch this movie.
Go watch it for yourself.
Enough people clapped when the movie was done. When I was walking out of the theater during the credits, just go to the bathroom real fast. Everyone was chatting in the lobby, and everyone seemed very enthusiastic about it. After coming off of BVS like 6 months ago, this is a much better step in the right direction for the DC cinematic universe.
It's still a bit fucked up, but it seems like they fucked it up in the right direction.
Yeah, like, it's a lot more fun. If there was a director's cut for this that I'm sure they will release, I'd be on top of that right away. Yeah, all this movie needed was more time to flesh things, to let things play out a little bit more. It's like, it could have been a balance of like chaos and then flesh things. Because like, there's that bar scene you see in the trailers. That's like the only time the movie takes time to slow down.
That's the one scene that feels like a legit scene that nobody fucked with.
The editing's a big part of a film. But that's
assembly.
That's my really only big problem with the film, is the way it was edited.
Well, you can trace everything back to that. Because even the Suicide Squad, it's like, they could have handled the ensemble better, and that's a pretty big issue in this movie. And I feel like, again, it's all there, it's just they really poorly distribute time. Certain characters just kind of get shafted and then like disappear and reappear.
My point with that though is that's the only major flaw I see with this film.
Yeah, you can trace them all back.
It's just that one thing. I feel like everything else in there, even the stuff that didn't really get to shine, you can still feel that it was probably really great in the end. You know, I did enjoy this film. I do recommend it, and I guess if we had to give a rating, 80 out of 100 schmoes.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a big DC fan, I think you'll probably enjoy this. If you're just coming in like me, where you've read a few comics and you like the movies, but this isn't your bread and butter, you might be a little more frustrated by this, because as a movie, it's a mess. But I still had fun, and I left feeling good.
The whole excuse of like, this movie's more for the fans and not, you know, like,
I don't think
the
that's
audiences
a good
and the
excuse,
critics.
really.
I don't think that's a good excuse ever. However, for this particular movie, I feel like it will apply more than previous DC film. Anyway, keep a lookout for our spoiler review. If you're new to the channel, subscribe! That's my horrible Joker impression. John is Jerry, and he's on Facebook.com/Bloomhouse.
Yeah.
Alright guys, well, it's late at night, and we gotta get to bed. I got a date tomorrow. With Destiny.